Some people tap their feet, some people snap their fingers, and some people just sway back and forth. I just sort of do them all together, I guess.
And now here is Elvis Presley.
I got news for you, baby.
So excited, I can't wait.
I think Presley was a star.
Well, heard the news.
Oh, he's such a sexy person. He will always be the king no matter what.
The King's home is ready to welcome visitors again.
Elvis Presley's Graceland has reopened for business after being closed for about 2 months now.
Music is playing through Graceland once again. People are walking through, taking in the rich history that is Elvis Presley. But the experience is vastly different.
I'm going to take your temperature, please. Okay.
In the era of COVID-19, you'll have to get your temperature checked before you're allowed inside.
All right, you're good to go.
It's one of several changes made to make sure you and employees are safe. Guests are highly encouraged but not required to wear masks, and the amount of people allowed inside has been reduced.
We usually would get 2,000 to 3,000 people a day. Now we're only doing 25% of that. Basically, touring the mansion is going to be like your own private tour of Graceland.
Only 10 people will be allowed inside the mansion. But despite the changes, guests are still looking forward to seeing a piece of history.
Sony Records has confirmed that one of their major Elvis releases in 2020 will become available on August 7. This 4-CD box set is titled From Elvis in Nashville. The set contains tracks of the recording sessions made in Nashville in June 1970. The set will also be available as a double LP. More information is to follow.
So you brought in this 1950s Louisiana Hayride program, but the reason I was really excited when you came to the table was the fact that we have this on the back of it.
Well, when I was in high school in the 50s, we'd love to go to Shreveport to the Louisiana Hayride on the weekends. And Elvis was there and Johnny Cash, and they weren't popular like they are now. So anyway, Elvis was standing on the steps there by himself, and so I just had this book and I went up to him and asked him if he'd mind giving me his autograph.
Wow. And what did you think of Elvis?
Really handsome,
yeah.
Really good looking. He was young then too, you know, it's before he married. And I heard he made $18 a performance at that time. So he was making big money, wasn't he?
Oh my goodness. Even with inflation, that's still not a lot of money.
No, it wasn't.
We see a lot of autographs here at the Roadshow.
Yeah.
One, you've procured these firsthand.
Right.
And I believe you 100% that you got them. If you had been someone who purchased this at an auction and brought it to the table, I would have looked at these signatures and said, they're fake.
Really?
Because they look really weird. They're not the Elvis signature we're used to seeing, and it's not the Johnny Cash signature that we're used to seeing. But we think that we've tried to nail it down. With more time, we could probably get very specific about the date, but we believe it's 1955. The program itself, these sell for about $50, $75 when they come up. And the other interesting thing about this program is, again, because it's pre-fame for Elvis and Johnny Cash, they're not even in this program.
No, they're not.
They were not famous enough yet to even be listed among the performers at the Louisiana Hayride.
No.
So it's fascinating. Together, having these two guys at that time, at auction for the program, I would put between $5,000 and $7,000.
Oh, really? I had no idea. Really, that's fantastic. I'm glad I kept it all these years. And at the time, I was wishing I had a piece of paper that I could have had them autographed, but it's probably better that it's on the Hayride book. That
Way
helps.
better.
Little Richard, one of the pioneers of the first wave of rock and roll music, died on May 9, 2020. Elvis recorded Richard's songs Tutti Frutti, Rip It Up, Long Tall Sally and Ready Teddy, putting Little Richard's compositions into millions of white teenagers' homes. Little Richard said of Elvis, "Elvis was a blessing. They wouldn't let black music through. He opened the door for black music. He was an integrator." Little Richard was 87 years old. Loanne Parker, the widow of Colonel Tom Parker, has died on May 10, 2020 in Las Vegas. Lowen Parker was an employee of the International Hotel in 1969. She was hired on by RCA Records as Elvis's tour secretary at the request of the Colonel. In 1972 she became Colonel Parker's personal secretary. Tom Parker's first wife, Marie Mott, died in 1986. Tom Parker and Lowen married in 1990. Lowen Parker was 84. The correct answer to last month's trivia question was ordinal numbers.
For the millionth and the last time, you were the first in line until the 12th of never.
I have made this month's trivia question very, very easy. What do these three song titles have in common? Place your answer in the comments. Hello everybody, this month there is still very little Elvis news due to Corona. So I decided to make a background special for you about the 1973 buyout. Now, many fans will be familiar with this story, but I also know that there is a large group of fans that is not aware of this story. Furthermore, I have some fantastic personal news, because after living here for 15 years, we have bought ourselves a new house. Yes, and now we are very excited about our new home, but now we have to focus onto the sale of our current house. I hope I can report in next month's video that we have succeeded in doing this. This new situation means that in the coming months I won't have as much time as usual to make these videos. But to quote an Elvis song, I'll be doing the best that I can. See you next month. Goodbye. In early 1973, Tom Parker made a proposal to RCA Records to buy out the rights to Elvis's back catalogue. In return for a lump sum payment of $5.4 million, RCA would get the sole rights to market and release whatever they wanted from Elvis's extensive back catalogue and not have to pay any royalties to Elvis for these rights in the future. The buyout also included the freedom to release whatever they wanted without the approval of Colonel Parker. At that time the deal was very lucrative as it was easy money for Elvis and Parker. After all, it was a paper deal and no actual work had to be done. Both Parker and Elvis could use the money. Elvis had a habit of excessive spending and needed $725,000 to pay Priscilla when he divorced from her in October 1973. The Colonel had serious gambling debts, but he was clever enough to negotiate a higher share. So, of the $5.4 million, Elvis ended up with just over $2 million. The consequences were far-reaching. RCA wanted to earn back the huge amount of money that they had spent on the deal. For this part of the story I am focusing on the United Kingdom. In 1974, RCA started by releasing the successful A Legendary Performer Volume 1 album with pre-1973 material. It reached number 20 in the charts, while the preceding 1973 album failed to chart in the United Kingdom. But RCA UK also made a huge mistake by leasing the Elvis material to record company Arcade for their 40 Greatest Hits album, because that particular album became the biggest compilation Elvis record of the 1970s in the United Kingdom. RCA got only a fraction from Arcade and Elvis received nothing of the revenues. But RCA had learned its lesson in the UK and started releasing highly successful albums with pre-1973 recordings. In 1975, The Sun Collection, and in February of 1977, Elvis in Demand. Both albums ended up in the top 20. Besides albums, now also pre-1973 material was used for single releases. In 1976,
with the girl of my best friend,
and
Suspicion
made it into the top 10 in the UK. Both singles reached number 9. Now, if we look at my country, the Netherlands, was released in 1974 and went to number 5 in the singles chart. Just 2 months later, RCA Holland hoped to do the same trick with but that release just failed to enter the top 40. When Elvis died, RCA Holland chose to promote their release of the 1960 song to commemorate Elvis's death. His then current single in the USA wasn't released as a single in Holland until October of 1977. But by that time, Wood & Hart had proven to be the moneymaker for RCA by staying in the charts for 11 weeks and by peaking at number 2. Wood & Hart generated big money for RCA in Holland, but none of it went to the Presley estate. After Elvis's death, things only got worse for the Presley estate. The experience of many fans was that the stream of compilation albums released by RCA was endless in the late 1970s. Many times no post-1973 hits like Moody Blue or Way Down were featured on those compilation albums. The only 2 albums with only post-1973 material during those days were the Our Memories of Elvis albums, volumes 1 and 2. Both were released in 1979 and volume 1 had the mastermind of the buyout deal on the cover of the album. With the revenues, Vernon Presley could pay at least some of the bills before he died in June of 1979. So the initial idea of accepting a lump sum of money for the back catalogue was in the end a bad decision. Okay, in 1973 the Elvis management made plans for maybe 3 to 5 years ahead. And with Elvis's death 4 years later, it was a good deal for him. But for the people who he left behind, it was a terrible deal. Vernon Presley struggled to pay the bills of Graceland, while RCA was filling their pockets. It made the relation between RCA and the Presley estate very hostile. The relation got even worse with the arrival of the Golden Oldie stations in the 1980s. They played Elvis's music on a daily basis, generating lots of royalties. And in the mid-1980s, many fans started buying their entire collection again when the CD was introduced onto the market. Now just imagine how wealthy Graceland could have been if all the missed royalties would have gone to them. 3 years after Vernon's death, it was decided that Graceland would be open to the public to generate sufficient income to pay off the unpaid bills. Years later, in protracted court cases inside and outside of the USA, it was decided that the 1973 agreement was not such a good deal. A financial settlement was made that was more in keeping with what the true value of the back catalogue was. From then on, the relationship between Sony and the estate became much better. Elvis once sang,
don't think twice, it's alright.
But the 1973 buyout shows that you sometimes do have to think twice. A proposal for easy money is often too good to be true. That's all for this month. Hope to see you next time. Until then, have a happy Elvis Presley Day.
You have a happy